Personal branding. Is it an inevitable part of 21st century life or something horribly vulgar that we should avoid at all costs? I'm joined by visiting professor in our management faculty, Stefan Stern. First of all, Stefan, what exactly is personal branding?
Personal branding is the idea that as a person, as a professional, you are actually a product as well as a human being. It sounds a bit commercial, but after all, the jobs market is competitive. There are lots of applicants for the good jobs. You have to distinguish yourself and differentiate yourself. So as well as having a CV and skills and experience and conducting interviews and so on, you probably need to come across as a kind of person. And you have to have a sort of brand.
So what's the difference between personal branding and reputation?
I think it's connected to reputation. We all understand that. But the language of branding, while it might seem a bit heavy-handed, does remind you that there is a sort of commercial undertaking here, that you've got to beat competition and you've got to set yourself apart in some way. The brand is your identity, and it's what people say about you when you're not there. So when a vacancy comes up or an opportunity comes up and 3 or 4 people are discussed, it's not just your reputation alone, it's actually you as a person and as an entity in the business, and a presence, and if you like, a brand as well.
So can you give us a few examples from public life?
Well, I would say that, for example, Jeff Immelt, who's the CEO of GE General Electric, comes across very clearly and forcefully as a person of action, a decisive person, a clear-thinking person. His public statements are very clear and to the point. I mean, he's American, and he plays on that, and you would never mistake him for anything else. But that says to you about GE, that at the top there is someone who really wants to make decisions, is quite bold and brave and going to say what he really thinks. And you have a strong sense of that when you see him, and that does pervade the company. And when people think of GE, they will think of Immelt, and it kind of ties into the brand of the company, at least as he wants to present it, which is decisive, bold, creative.
So how does social media fit into this world of personal branding?
Social media is really all-pervasive. It's always on. It's hard to delete, erase your social media history. And so you have to take part in it too. If you are, as the CAS students will know from marketing, you have to be, as they say, authentic, real, or present in every channel, in every kind of bit of the market, whether it's in the high street or online or wherever it is. So the same is true of the individual. Online, you have to have an identity and a name and a reputation and a level of activity. It's possible to keep a lower profile online, and that might be appropriate in all sorts of professions. Alternatively, it might be a very good idea to have a high profile. But just always remember that these things that you put out there are out there. I think it was Eric Schmidt at Google who joked about 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds wanting to adopt a new name because they needed a new brand, they needed a new identity. They'd lived their life very publicly on Facebook, and actually on reflection, mature reflection, would quite like to erase some of it. It might not be possible. I think he then said he was joking about that, but that emphasises the point that this social media stuff is really, it's a real thing, even though it's virtual.
And what would you say to those who would say that personal branding is hideously vulgar and we shouldn't get involved in it?
Well, I think 20 years ago, I would have been precisely one of those people, in a very sort of British way, who would have said that this is vulgar, it's about boasting, it's about showing off, it's not what we were brought up to do. We were supposed to be restrained and understated. But culturally, you have to understand the times you're living in and the world that you're in. And even for us Brits, we've learned that we do actually have to get out there and sell not just our company and our products and services and so on, but sometimes ourselves. It's a cliche, but it's probably true that Americans tend to be a bit better at this sort of thing. But of course, it's a global business. And one of the subtleties and difficulties of international business is understanding exactly who it is you're talking to and what cultural context you are operating in. And you can't take one approach to fit all these different markets. You've got to respect the cultural traditions. And yet, as part of this thing called globalization, there is a sort of merging or a blending. We all speak a kind of English, for example, in business. And some of these concepts, such as personal branding, are going to spread almost inevitably through the business world bit by bit. But just remember which market you're in at which time.
Stefan, thanks so much for joining us.